So good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you today in Northampton, Massachusetts. Definitely beat a statistic. I really shouldn't be here in a lot of ways, which you'll find out a little bit later. Though I'm not from here originally, I've indeed grown to love and respect it as an excitingly artistic, socially and politically stimulating, and extremely innovative area. As some of you may know, the state of Massachusetts is home to the first American public bank, the first American public park, and the first American public school, as well as the first American university. More recently, Massachusetts was the first state to issue same-sex marriage licenses. These are just a few of the many strides towards public access and equality Massachusetts has taken over the years. I trust that there will be many more to come. Massachusetts is also where the first basketball and first volleyball games were played. Boston is known for being the home of one of the oldest baseball stadiums still in use today. Baseball, in fact, seems to be a favorite pastime of the area, as one can see fans wearing all sorts of Red Sox gear all year round. The well-known phrase, "3 strikes, you're out," has taken on a meaning that moves way beyond simply an umpire's call. Massachusetts is in the process of passing the 3 strikes law. Perhaps some of you have heard of the buzz about it regarding California, who was the first to instate this law in 1994. This law is one that mandates minimum sentences for second and third time convicted felons. The 3 strikes law mandates a sentence of 25 years to life on a 3rd strike, despite the reasons or severity of the crime. Most who are affected by this law are convicted of nonviolent, drug-related crimes. While many can see why repeat offenders might be deserving of harsher sentences, it is important to take note of the intricacies of how and why one might be defined as a repeat offender. It is true that 1st, 2nd, and 3rd felonies can be accrued through one incident. It is true that if one is convicted of a felony as a minor, it can indeed count as a 3rd strike or as a 2nd strike later in life. It is indeed true that many 1st and or 2nd time nonviolent drug offenders are appointed public defenders and are coerced into pleading guilty for a plea bargain. What can a plea bargain look like? It can look like accepting 3 to 20 years for selling crack cocaine in a school zone. Why does this all matter to me, a senior at Smith College, a non-addict, a tax-paying, law-abiding citizen? It matters to me because I am the first in my immediate family to not have been incarcerated. Because I've seen firsthand how being poor and a person of color affects my family in the eyes of the court. I have seen firsthand the cycles of violence and destruction that is perpetuated or can be perpetuated through the court system. My family has been torn apart because of my brother trying to feed his family. Yes, he was selling drugs. Yes, that is illegal. And yes, he was in a school zone. Yes, he should have gotten punished. But the realities that surround these facts that I've just listed for you is that he was selling drugs out of his home, which happened to be in a school zone. A school zone is defined as in or within 1,000 feet of premises owned, rented, or leased by an institution of higher learning. The premises of a public or private youth center or a playground, or within 300 feet of the premises of a public swimming pool or a video arcade facility. Now, this is a major issue, and it's a major issue because in small cities and urban areas, there's a school or a school zone every couple blocks. That means most of the people that are living within these urban areas or small cities live in a school zone. So even while doing things within the safety of their own home, they are at risk of, being a felon for that reason. Now, why should this matter to you as potentially not Massachusetts residents, as potentially not taxpayers quite yet? Well, it should matter to you because it actually affects each and every one of us. Through taxes, through poverty rates, through the increased number of broken families, which actually increases both taxes and poverty in our communities. It should matter to you because this country claims to be a nation of freedom. This country claims that one is innocent until proven guilty. This country claims that it values justice, equality, and rights of all its citizens. If Massachusetts follows in the footsteps of California, they will remove the ability of judges to rule fairly on a case-by-case basis. If Massachusetts follows in California's footsteps, it will see incarceration rates rise dramatically. But it actually seems as though that is what they want. Massachusetts receives approximately $46,000 per prisoner per year. That's $46,000. Not only that, and this is a recent development just coming into my knowledge, not only that, the sheriff of Chicopee's Women Correctional Facility, which just opened in 1997, just received a $550 million bond. $550 million bond. To quote Sheriff Ash, based out of Chicopee, he came up with a method of operation signed in October 2011 to determine how incarcerated people will be moved around, and two, in the spring, an additional 128 new beds will be added to Chicopee. Both are being funded through the $550 million bond authorization allocated through the capital budget, managed by the Division of Capital Assets. $350 million of that is allocated to create new bed space and can be applied to building new facilities, and $200 million for existing improvements, end quote. Now what that means is that, or one of the things that this means, is that prisons and jails are being built in communities and being sold essentially to communities that are, that have old factories that are fallen, that are rural areas that are also coming into poverty within. So prisons are a way of making money. I'm not sure if y'all have heard of the correctional, the CCA, the Correctional Corporation of America. So this is a series of private prisons that have been coming up around the country, and they keep popping up. They keep popping up, and actually currently in the United States of America, there are more prisons than there are Walmarts, which is a very interesting and very sad fact in my eyes, since so many folks are mobilizing to fight against, the building of more Walmarts. Not in our community, people are crying, and yet we are letting private prisons come in, and we're allocating $550 million to build more prisons and incarcerate more people. So the laws in this country are defined by whole people, right? Crime is defined by a whole people, and whole people commit crimes. The three strikes law does not leave room for whole situations and whole people to be looked at and judged fairly. Simply incarcerating people does not fix people. Yes, it might get them off the street. Yes, some jails and some prisons have programs to help people get educated and learn valuable skills. But simply incarcerating people does not tend to the fact that 75% of women who are incarcerated report histories of sexual and physical violence. 82% were arrested for drug offenses. 15% had severe mental illnesses. 50% reported symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. 33% were homeless upon arrest. 85% were mothers. This information is provided by Kate DeCou, a former assistant superintendent of the Hampden County Jail. 85% were mothers. So I ask, what's happening to these children? I would not ask you to simply take my word on all the negative impacts. Just learn. I actually have a couple things as I will take some questions that I'd like to pass out if you would like to learn more information about this topic and or contact your representatives. And you don't actually have to be a resident of the area to send a letter to the representatives. Okay? So if you wouldn't mind just passing that around. And I can take any questions. Yes?
So when you were talking about new prisons being built in like poorer areas, I think that you mentioned that was actually bringing money into these communities that maybe were a little more run down over the years. And to me that kind of seemed like a good thing, although I got the sense that you were implying that it was not a good thing. So can you explain the downside of not only getting drug dealers off the streets in some of these poor communities, but also bringing money into the communities through building prisons?
Sure. So there are a couple points that were brought up there, and that it was suggested that maybe I had said that by building prisons in poor communities, it actually brings money into those communities. And I also heard, other than the getting folks off the street, what other benefits is there to building new prisons? And so one of the things that I just want to clarify is that that's actually how the prisons are sold into these communities, is creating and I'm going to call it an illusion, creating the illusion that jobs will be brought into the community, that having a prison will bring people, offer people that live in the area jobs, and it'll help the grocery stores. But realistically speaking, that's not actually a reality. So what happens is the prisons function in connection with all of these other corporations, right? So there are phone companies that work directly with prisons and jails. There are food industries, often, and actually this is another interesting point you may want to look into, but the same food that we're feeding our children in schools is the same company that are feeding our prisoners. So really it's not bringing any money into the communities. In fact, a lot of times it draws money out because it becomes stigmatized too, right? If there's a prison in your area, a lot of people will leave. And so it really perpetuates this cycle of poverty in these communities. So thank you for your question. Yes?
You say it's already been passed in California, the three strikes law.
Indeed.
At what stage in the process is it in Massachusetts? I mean, how close is it to happening?
Uncomfortably close. Honestly, it's already past the first stage of representatives, and so I'm sorry, I'm blanking on exactly what the two steps are, but it's on to the second phase. They're actually predicting that if it passes, it will pass by April of this year. Back in November of 2011, just last year, it passed the first stage. Thank you. Yes.
I'm persuaded that 3 strikes you're out is pretty rigid. So how about 6 strikes and you're out?
Well, so I've been asked, it's been suggested that 3 strikes you're out is a bit rigid. So it was offered, what about 6 strikes? right? So I think that for me, what it says is if someone's getting to 6 strikes, there's a deeper issue that we're not dealing with. And there are some instances, you know, that I think complicate it in terms of like if someone's like murdering, you know what I mean, and committing violent crimes, I think that definitely brings up another level to the discussion. You know what I mean? We don't want to let someone, you know, kill 6 people before we decide like, okay, you know, maybe you really are a threat to society. But in terms of like nonviolent drug-related crimes that are often fueled out of poverty, I would ask the question, what do we need to do to equal the playing field? What do we need to do to help people get out of poverty? What do we need to do to help people get out of addiction? And instead of, you know, throwing people in cages and, you know, hoping that when they get out and no longer have access to food stamps, to public housing, because this is a reality, you know, they no longer, if you are a convicted felon, you don't have access to public housing, federal loans, food stamps, no public assistance, right? Plus you're a convicted felon, so how are you supposed to get a job? Now if you have kids on top of this, I don't know, you know. Yes, please.
I think at one point towards the end you said it's been proven that prisons don't fix people. I was wondering, should that be the goal of a prison? Should we completely revolutionize the prison systems and turn them into rehabilitation places? Or are they places to keep people who just can't play well with others away from others?
Right, right. So what I've heard is that are prisons meant to rehabilitate, or should they be used to just keep people that can't play well with others? I like the phrase that you use. And I think that it's supposed to be a combination of both. Unfortunately, the prison system in America has not come out of that desire to help people create change. It's actually a newer technique, you know, to be trying to actually rehabilitate people and teach them some skills as to how to deal with, you know, how to play nicely with others. You know what I mean? And so I feel like it's a little bit complicated and simple in the same breath, in that, yes, incarceration should be, when it's used, it should be used to rehabilitate and to hopefully, you know, be able to put folks back into the community. Second, sorry, I'm missing the second part, but yeah, I think that ideally, if prisons are going to be used, that we make it more of a, let's teach you some skills, let's deal with the real issues. And sometimes, you know, there are other issues at play. You know, a lot of folks that are incarcerated do struggle with mental illness. So what are we doing to deal with that, you know, within our communities before it has to get to, you know, incarcerating them?
Well, you seem like a very liberal person to me, and I hear a lot of nanny state doctrine underneath your proposals. But let's say I go with that for a little bit. There are still a whole lot of people who are in prison who really deserve to be there. And let's say they go through a rehabilitation. And how many times do we rehabilitate them if they continue to come out and keep committing crimes? I mean, where is the notion of personal responsibility in all of this?
Absolutely. So I actually might ask you to clarify. I've never heard the term nanny.
A nanny state in which the government says, we will fix you, we will take care of you, we will give you everything you need. And so as a result, people will never develop their own self-resources, their own self-reliance.
Great, thank you. So I've been asked, where is the accountability for folks that do commit crime? Like when does the state kind of, you know, say it's your responsibility to be a human being is what I'm hearing. And a law-abiding human being is what I'm hearing. And I think that that's a really great question because we are all individuals, and I think that, I mean, it kind of goes back to one of the things that I mentioned in the piece, just that, you know, that people create the law. And I think that one of the things, most of the folks that are in prison now, or a good number of them that are in prison now are I mean, first, you know, there is the nonviolent drug crimes, but there are also the violent crimes. And yes, some folks deserve to be incarcerated for a number of time. And I think that that's a great question. And where to draw the line? I guess I don't really know that answer. All I know for sure is that 3 strikes you're out, and like taking the power away from the judge to be able to actually judge and formulate a real opinion and a real thought is not the way to go.
Thank you, Trenta.